So what I'm going to do today is take you through a process of how I resolve my works, or how I work on works in progress that I've had sort of stacked up and have not finished, some from when I first started and some from more recently. This was an acrylic mixed media piece that I had done in 2021, and I am so close to finishing it, but it's just not quite there yet. So what I'm going to do today is go through a pile. I just grab a pile and I look at it and I think, okay, in this area here, I know that I want to do my leaf work. So some line work with my white Uniball Signal pen and fill in some of those details. I also want to go back in with my black pen and add some details on this bronze leaf down here. So I'm just gonna see where my black pen is. There it is. I have a lot of supplies on my desk right now, as many as I could get without sort of totally planning what I'd be doing today, but also being organized enough that I don't have to scoot to my art room from the kitchen. And so this is a primarily acrylic paper, or sorry, an acrylic work. And it feels a little bit like Bristol paper. I can't recall. I think it might be Bristol paper, which I love working on. It's such a wonderful paper for acrylics. And I'm just gonna lighten up some areas, like this little flower down here, this very abstract flower, with my paint pens. So I've added the line work, and immediately I want to add a little bit more white near these dots down here. So I'm just gonna, whoops, take you with me. And I'm using a different tripod today. My other one needs to be fixed. So here we go. And I'm just gonna add a little bit more of a white mark beside this already there black acrylic paint pen mark. Sometimes the addition of white in your art, or in my art anyway, is a way that I like to almost resolve it, brighten it up, bring out the contrast. You can see there's so much energy in this work. I used a lot of Neocolor Caran D'ache water-soluble and non-water-soluble materials. And looking at this, I feel like I'm going to set it aside and go back to it at another time with probably gouache or acrylic paint, and just to make these areas a little bit more vibrant. So we'll just go to the next artwork. I'll zoom you back out. And this was definitely done on Bristol paper. I used a lot of different spray inks as my background, a lot of metallics, and some Neocolor crayons in here. And so this is just a different style than you have seen from me on YouTube here, if you've been following me. Again, this was like a practice piece where I had just put down some gold paint and was playing around with watercolors and acrylics. And this up here is actually, I believe I used this gelato. Now this was in 2019 in May. It would have been when I really just got into painting every day. Yes, this is the one. So you can see I'm scrubbing it on, and I'm gonna use the side of my art sponge and just to blend it over. And I blended it into this gorgeous moon shape. So that's just an example of using a gelato, a water-soluble product, on watercolor paper. Up here, I used, I can't recall if this was, I think those are wax crayons I used up here. And we will set this aside because this pretty much looks done to me. It was a good practice piece. This piece is one I did on toned paper. So Strathmore makes some wonderful toned paper, and I realized that immediately I did my cute little ease, my mark making, and I forgot to add the dot in the middle, which I love to do. And I'm gonna do that with my gold Sharpie, a water-based paint pen, and just add in those dots right in the center of that E. And I'll probably go back again and make my whites a little bit whiter in those areas. This little butterfly, maybe make it a little bit whiter. And I see there's some white in here. Just gonna bring it out a little bit more. And what I want to do is grab my Neocolor 2s, my water-soluble crayons, and I'm just feeling like bringing this color in. I really like these two colors. This one is, what is it? Turquoise green. That makes sense. And I'm gonna go over, this was watercolor that was, or sorry, this was acrylic paint that is here within these white lines. Because that doesn't show up a whole lot, I'm gonna go to this green, and I'm just gonna show you what the addition of the water-soluble crayons over top of acrylic looks like. It's a really, really great effect. Just kind of scrub it on. And I like to blend it over top of the acrylic to look like it was almost an acrylic paint color. So you can blend it with your finger or a sponge. And I just feel like that brightened this painting up a little bit. If you're used to working on white, whether it's watercolor paper or a white canvas or just a white gesso on a wood panel, consider tinting your gesso, or consider a different color substrate, so a different color of paper or whatever it is you're working on. So this toned paper can really make you see, oops, I realized I smudged my polka dots, and that's okay because I can probably, if they're not dry yet, I might be able to remedy that. And I can cover that up a little bit later with some paint. I'll wait for that area to dry, and I'm always bound to smudge some of my work because I just get so excited and I want to move on to the next thing so quickly. Gonna add a few big black dots in there with those little dots. I love working on tanned paper. I loved working on this gray toned paper. I don't know if I like that black dot there, but when it dries, I can go back to it and resolve it at a later date. I'm gonna add in my gold here again, now that it's dry. And I can see I used like an oil pastel here. And so that's all I want to do with this particular piece today. This is one I wanted to go back to, so I'll just move these as it's kind of distracting looking at all of them. This too shall pass. This was in 2020, and you can probably guess why that phrase resonated with me. I am going to use my Titan Buff Posca pen, which actually, I think the cartridge is stuck in here. See if I can get it activated. Woo! Uh-oh. Oh. And somebody told me, they wrote to me and said, make sure you cap your Posca pen when you shake it. And I'm like, yeah, I know that. And I don't usually do it. I was just being polite, but there you go. I got it all over me. So, and let's just look. Oh, I'm lucky that I had a mat down. Okay, so I'm just going over top with my ivory, which is like a Titan Buff Posca pen, over this line work that already has this ivory color down. I just wanted to brighten it up, and you can see that I was working fast the day I painted this, and it smudged a little bit of the permanent pen here. So I'm just gonna go over top of it and brighten it up. And now that I know how to do my roses, I didn't really know how to do the roses back in 2020. I was just playing around and practicing and learning art. I think I used a water-soluble material here for this little green rose. And I'm just gonna, look at that. I can actually remove it. Again, the beauty of working with water-soluble pencil crayons, I can actually remove it and do the roses that I've come to love. So this one as well, I'm just lightening it up because I want to go back over top of it. I kind of like that faded look. This one's not too bad. I might be able to actually work with that one. So I'm gonna go to my blue water-soluble pencil crayon. No, you know what? It's a little bit, I'm gonna actually get that off too. Isn't that amazing? You just wet the end of your brush. Try not to scrub the paper too much. And there you go. So if you made a mistake, or say this was a rose that was like orange and I just didn't want it to be orange, I could go back in, change it up. And while I wait for my paper to dry, I'm gonna go in with my acrylic paint. Okay, so we'll let that dry. And this is just sort of a fun practice of, again, what I call resolving my work, almost like editing it, going back to paintings and making those paintings that I like, paintings that I love. And this is Tri Art Titanium White. I also really like Golden Titanium White Fluid Acrylic. So this is more, it's not really a thick paint that I'm using, it's an acrylic paint. And I'm just gonna use my dollar store Crayola round brush. And I'm gonna just clean up this bottle a little bit. And I'm just gonna go over top of where there's already white acrylic paint. And maybe we'll just start here. I'm just gonna pour some on. I'm gonna be brave. Art is all about taking risks, right? Look at that, it just brightens up this whole painting. Now this is, again, primarily watercolor, a watercolor painting, right? With mixed media elements over top. Sometimes the acrylic paint, this white, will pick up, for instance, the blue watercolor, and it will mix in and you'll get not that pure white look. And that's okay too, because you might really like that effect. And when you practice this, you may start to want that effect. So right now I'm adding this fluid acrylic white and resolving this painting to really love it. I see I have some marks over here. This isn't a painting I plan to sell, but say you were hoping to sell it and you just didn't want to use white paint over those marks. If you use high quality watercolor paper, you should be able to get them off. So I'm just gonna see if I can clean it up a bit with adding water. So I was able to remove a little bit, and there, that's pretty good. In 2020, this was almost like art journaling for me. I would just buy different types of art paper, watercolor paper, mixed media paper, whatever was on sale at the time, and I would decide in the moment, what supply do I want to play with? And during 2020, my son was about 2 years old, and art was what I did for myself when he would have a nap, or if I had any help. Okay, so there we go. So if you want to grab one of your old paintings on paper, your works in progress, and try adding, you know, if it's a watercolor painting, or even if it's acrylic, try what I would call editing it, especially if it's abstract, to make it something new again. And I also mixed up this fluorescent red and white, which makes the most beautiful vibrant pink, which I use in a lot of my work. And I am going to add it in down here because when I first added it in, it dried darker than what I had intended. And it was also up here a little bit where I'm going to put those roses. And this makes me learn to love the process of revisiting a work, or say an art journal, at a later date and reminding yourself how far you've come, what you really loved about the work, what maybe you didn't care for. I'm just gonna dip into my Master's brush cleaner and get rid of some of this paint, just so we can go back to some different mixed media. I really like Master's brush cleaner. It's really great. It reminds me of an old shaving cream container that my dad used to use. Okay, and without smudging where I'm at, I'm gonna go in and take my water-soluble pencil crayon and do a rose without too much pressure, because this area is a bit wet. And that rose, this is a little bit more of a yellow green that I would like. So let's see what we have. I'm looking for a green that might be maybe this color, a little bit more of an army green color. I'm adding in this rose. And I really like that. I like that a lot better now that I've kind of learned the style of roses that I love. I'm gonna go back in and add this light blue one here. And I kind of lost the shape of the rose, so what I do is I go in with white, but I might be able to go in with a brighter blue. I'm just gonna see, or maybe more of a gray. We could try maybe this. Nope, that's not quite dark enough. Not that one. So this is all just trial and error, playing around with what you like. Okay, there we go. And now that looks a bit more like those abstract roses that I have come to love in my work. I'm gonna add a pink one up here. I'm gonna flip the page over, otherwise I'm gonna have more acrylic paint all over me to go with the spray of white that came out of the Posca pen because I didn't put the lid on. And this area, because it has so much acrylic, it's hard to get that rose back. So I'm gonna try a slightly darker color. There we go. And just see if I can get it to work. I mean, it really doesn't look like a rose, but it's an abstract flower, right? I like that. I'll probably wait until this is fully dry and I'll go over it again. Immediately I see beside these little white, almost raindrops, I want to add my Uniball gold, just again, without smudging. This is tricky. How do I want to do this? And again, I'm a bit shaky, so I'm gonna rest. We'll go in this way. Making you dizzy. Good thing that you like me and hopefully are inspired by what I'm doing. Oh, I did touch the acrylic paint, but that's all right. Okay, so I like that better. And I'm gonna fix that one because it's a little jagged. So this painting, again, it's one I started several years ago, but I'm learning to revisit it, learning to love it. I am learning things about myself in this process. I see that I want to add this caramel gelato just to match some of this ivory Posca pen, and I might just put it in this corner over here. Just want to show you the beauty of these, where you can kind of scrub it on And I often use my finger, but I'm just gonna use the end of this art sponge, which you can buy at the art stores. And I'm risking smudging my acrylic cloud here, but that's okay. Looks like I did it. And so it just changed the painting a little bit. It moves the eye around, and I'm gonna do that with this beautiful, I love this guava, and I'm just deciding where I might want a little pop of color. I might just do a little bit right in here so you can see. I'm gonna zoom back in. Whoops. Because I have, oh, I think I was zoomed in. Okay, so here it is here. Just gonna smudge it. And I really like that. It's very subtle. And I'm gonna go to my Iced Rose Metallic Gelato. And this has a little bit of shimmer. So I'm gonna go into that same area, scrub it on. And say that you've discovered you love shimmer in your work. You go back to a work in progress. There it is. You can see that beautiful shimmer. And maybe I want to brighten up this area a little bit more with that red. I don't use this red very much. This is Iced Currant. This looks like it has a bit of a shimmer. So when I'm hesitant to put it right on, because I don't use it very often, I'm just gonna rub it on my finger. Really looks like lipstick. And I'm going to brighten up that area and give texture. And I love that. It worked out really well. And when the acrylic dries, I can even do a little bit of texture over top of the white acrylic, just to give it a bit of a red tint. So that's pretty cool. And I think I better let this painting dry before I really smudge it too much, but I'll just zoom back out. So again, that's like those watercolor bases that we've been doing with the drip. I used some line work in there. Part of me wants to brighten up some of that line work before I abandon the painting again for a bit. And just decide, you know what, I didn't have my little moon in this painting. I might add a little moon, because I didn't really start adding my moons until a few years ago. So I'm gonna add it up here, use my trusty stencil to help me with my roundness. Become more well-rounded as a human. Okay, there we go. So this was a painting again that was in a pile, and now it's getting closer to possibly being a painting that I could sell or gift. So that one's just going to be set aside. And we'll just look over a couple other paintings. I did want to get into a little bit of acrylic inks with you today. Speaking of which, this painting does have a lot of acrylic inks. It's when I was trying to learn my reticulated background with all those little veins, and I was just new to Posca pens, so looking at this, I feel like I would go over some of these areas again just to brighten them up. I don't have my blue Posca pen handy, but I have my white, so I'm just going to brighten that up a bit. So this is a work I would definitely revisit because I feel like it's quite tight. It's when I started, I would fill the whole paper. This was in 2019. So this was the time that I had taken the fresh paint course with Floral and Lindsay Links and painted well over 100 paintings. I painted hundreds of small paintings during the course just to find my own style. And what the course was about was Flora Bowley and Lindsay Links used their platforms on Instagram to provide the students, when we were finished, the option of submitting 10 paintings to go in this worldwide sale on Instagram. So we were allowed to submit 10 paintings, all starting at $50 US. And we listed them on Instagram with the title, the price, the size, and how to, how they'd be shipped. And that is the course and the process that I was absolutely floored. I sold all 10 paintings all over the world and was really grateful to be part of that course. And just that process of doing so many paintings gets you to this point where you're not fixated on each one. And it really helped me find my own style. So you can see I have a lot of different styles as I go through this pile. These are all these practice pages. This was another one from 2020. I'm kind of digressing, but that fresh paint course was fantastic because it just taught you different materials, how to let go, how to play. Floral did publish a book. I believe it was called Fresh Paint, and she featured some artists, and my work was in there, which was incredible. My painting titled Lost and Found, and I loaned that book out, but I will at some point have to share that with you. It was just a really neat process, and to be honest, that course is what helped me know that I could just sell my paintings right from Instagram. I didn't have a website at the time. I didn't think I would be able to sell my art because I was fairly new to the art world. And I guess where I'm going with this is it never hurts to just start, even if it's like a private Instagram account initially or a social media account, Facebook, whatever. Post what you're doing when you get comfortable and you feel brave, put it out there. Let other people see it, even if it's friends and family, and you'd be amazed at the positivity and the amount of people that can relate to what you're doing, that might love your work and possibly want to buy it. And it's just that process for yourself of knowing that what you're doing has value, and we're all starting at this beginner place at some point in our life. And anyway, it was this course and the quantity of work that came out of it that prompted me to sell the work online and keep selling. And through the pandemic, this one again is 2020, what a wonderful thing to have while, locked down. I see these little roses here and I just want to go in and brighten them up. I'm going to change that rose to maybe a slightly darker blue, kind of like this purplish blue. So yeah, I sort of stumbled on selling my art. It was really kind of wild. And in this, I feel like I'm not going to go back to this one so much. I, in hindsight, painted right to the edge of the painting. And what I know now is with selling my work, it's much easier for people to frame it if you leave an edge, if you tape your edges. I remind myself of that, and then I just kind of get excited and I move on. And I just start painting. So I'll have to keep that in mind. This was 2018. So like I bought the cheapest watercolor paper. You can see on the back, I was just writing some notes about courses I was taking. So this is 90 pound paper. And I was just playing around with stamping and absolute play. Looking at this now, I know I can show you guys how to use acrylic inks in a way where you can take an acrylic background. This is another example. Say you have just these playful pieces of art laying around, abstract, you filled up the page, there's different mark making, different sizes, different colors, metallics. You can put an image over and go around it with acrylic ink in that kind of reductionistic method. So to take it even further, this is what I'm going to do with you all today, is I had this background that was in the rejection pile initially. I was trying to find my own style. I had some of that reticulated pattern that came through here. I was using some gelatos, so I'm not sure how this is going to go because we're going to be using acrylic inks and India inks. So this is Liquitex. You can also use like golden high flow inks. This one's magenta. They are more costly. This was about $40 Canadian for 4 ounces, and this was quite a while ago. But fluid acrylics is what we're going to be getting into right now. I did a little introductory video not that long ago. We're going to be using India ink, and I'm not going to get into the supply reviews. I'm just going to show you how these paintings came to be, where I had these wild backgrounds that I didn't know I would ever go back to, like for instance, this one and this one. And I found images I loved. We can start with just a simple shape, like a leaf shape. I had chosen irises, and this is a painting where the background, these are acrylic inks, but then I went around the flowers with acrylic paint, so opaque. Today, what I wanted to do, which I thought would be super cool, would be to go around these flowers, whether they're watercolor, acrylic ink as the base layer, and do acrylic inks around them. I did do these classes on Patreon last year, and they were such a hit. And the people that were on my Patreon, they came out with the most beautiful, beautiful work. And I had purchased a couple of the originals from my students because I loved what they had done. So again, this is a black Sharpie where I just did the outline of the irises. And for time purposes, what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna move a few things out of the way. I have my palette paper, and sometimes I wear gloves. I'm just gonna see, I do have some gloves here. So hold tight, I'm gonna get my gloves. Just because I find acrylic ink to be quite messy. I like to mix the inks. I like to mix the brands. This is Liquitex Quinacridone Magenta, one of my favorite colors. And what I do sometimes, if I want, is I mix them right on my palette. This is parchment paper, my palette today. And I've decided, because I'm just gonna move these out of the way. I also have my red Liquitex, which I can mix. My Dr. P.H. Martin's Bombay ink in cherry red and magenta. So what I'm gonna do, oh, and I don't know if I'd mentioned, this is Try Art, which is a Canadian company, which is really, really good. It's a little bit more affordable than Golden. And I just wanted to give anyone in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, a heads up. Inglewood Art Store sells Try Art, and I've really liked these. I haven't used them a lot, but they're really good. So just a little plug for Try Art, this Canadian company. Okay, back to the acrylic inks. I recommend using flat brushes, a flat angled brush. This is a small one to kind of get in the corners. This is a regular mixed media brush I bought at Michael's, level 2. It says Princeton on it. And what I do is I'm a little bit wild. I know that I want to keep my videos full of content, and I don't have a ton of time. You know what, I am going to use my palette. Ooh, ah! Ho ho, there we go. Let's just clean this up before I make too much of a mess. There is an art to videotaping and doing art at the same time. And this is all learning. So I'm gonna soak up that acrylic ink before it dries on my palette. And I'm gonna really quickly bring this over my background. And you can just see how beautiful. And just add a little bit of water, only because I'm on camera and I just want you to get the gist of what we're doing, is to not make this video super, super long. Sometimes when I'm bold, I just put the acrylic ink right on my paper. And I'm carving out with my flat brush around the black Sharpie paint pen, the water-based paint pen, with the acrylic inks. And the original of this was done on watercolor paper. I recommend at least 140-pound paper. I'm just gonna zoom in so you can see the gorgeous texture coming through in the background. It dries fairly quickly, so you need to work quite fast. The more you have for designs underneath your work. So the busier the background, the more stenciling, the more mark making, the more beautiful I feel it looks. And you could also do this technique with watercolor. But unfortunately, you do have to work quite quickly because it dries on your brush, it dries on your palette. And obviously, again, I'm working quickly because I'm doing a video, and so I'm not being too particular. If you go over the black, this is where my little brush would come in handy, but I don't feel like cleaning two brushes today, so you can just use a smaller brush for these fine details. And I'm just carving around the stems here. And I've done this on canvas, so I do have some cows that I have done on canvas. My cow, Bird Whispers, actually all of my cows, Foothills Farm Girl and Off to Church. If you want to check those out, they are on my print website at artmagic.ca. Artmagic is spelled with a K on the end, not a C. You can see I'm tidying up a bit as I go. What I'm going to do is turn you over, and I'm going to switch over to red. If I had orange, I would use that. Let's just go down here. This Liquitex red is hit and miss. It just depends. Oh, this one's really good. I have bought one before that the pigment just was not very vibrant. And you can just see your image coming through so beautifully here. And what we're gonna do once we get the acrylic ink down is we're going to go back over with our paint pens, and you can also fill in the leaves. And for instance, if you've done a flower or whatever shape, you can fill that in with a different acrylic ink as opposed to just leaving it with this texture that you had underneath. That makes sense. I usually work like ultra fast, but it's just being on a small table here and being cautious I don't spill it or spray my kitchen. Okay, so we're gonna just fill this over here, and we're gonna do this. So make sure you can still see me. And these acrylic inks are a little bit strong. If you're prone to headaches with scents, which I am, I find colognes, perfumes, I get really bad headaches. So make sure you're in a well-ventilated space. I have my windows open here because they're a little bit potent. And like I said, I wear gloves just to make sure. Just gonna zoom out for a second. I wear gloves just out of precaution. And just in the small area here, I'm gonna just get rid of the ink on my brush, and I can always, actually I am gonna go back to that now. Let's go back to slightly different color, cherry red. And what I like to do is mix orange in here. Just like check out that texture coming through. And you can see I use quite a bit of ink. So there's lots of different names for this style of painting. Just had to take a little glance back to make sure I'm staying, I can see what's iris and what's not. I can see right here. And this is just such a relaxing exercise, especially if you've done it several times. It takes some practice. So this, again, it's not perfect in that you can see right now I'm just trying to brighten up some of the areas that I had missed, blend. It's much easier to do on a canvas. And just this area over here. You can use a little bit of water with your acrylic ink, but you don't want to water it down too much, or you really do lose the vibrancy. And I'm just gonna go over top of this area here. Again, if I had an orange, I would use orange just before that goes into my iris design. I'm just gonna catch it with my brush. But I find this technique really easy and it's really effective. And having the option now of acrylic inks is just really cool. So what I'm gonna do now, I'm just sort of getting some of those edges and providing energy. So again, when you work quick, it provides energy into your work. I'm gonna darken up this area a little bit. And there's just, the beauty of this is it's already beautiful. I do see that I wanna go back in here with more paint, and you can always do that later. Because I'm on camera, I'll do that later. Okay, so that's just an example of what you can do. And this is not by any means, in my opinion, finished. Like I said, once it's dry, I really like doing my outline in white with a white water-based Sharpie. So if we go back and look at this painting, Island Iris Envy, there's that white outline. And again, I used acrylic paint because I used the acrylic ink on the inside of the flower. So you can just see the vibrancy of these paintings comes with the contrast of the opaque acrylic paint around the images of the acrylic ink on the inside. Whereas this is the vibrancy that comes of the background, seeing those background layers. And then, you know what, it's sort of, you could do acrylic paint on the inside of the irises, but I would do them a different color. I absolutely love what's going on already, and just adding different inks over top will be really beautiful. I wouldn't use any acrylic opaque ink on here, or sorry, opaque paint. This one as well, you can see I've varied the marks with a black outline of the flowers, a gray outline, thin, thick. I did some etching in here, which is kind of cool. This was Bristol paper. Bristol paper is lovely to work on. So often what I love the idea of is, again, if we were to do, you have these where you've been cleaning your brush off, and let's just say you want to, I'm just gonna find my iris paintings. We can kind of take this one as an example. If you're cleaning your brush off, you end up with this beautiful mark making. Speaking of cleaning my brush, just before this acrylic ink ruins my brush, I'm gonna get it off either on paper, or in this case, a paper towel. And I'm gonna use my brush cleaner, a Master's brush cleaner, because it will save your paintbrushes. I'm working up this lather and just making sure I'll fully wash my brush after this video. But you don't want to use acrylic ink on your good brushes. So that's mostly soap in here. I'm just gonna set that aside for a sec. And I just wanted to show you, take your black Sharpie paint pen, and let's just say you want to do an iris. They've got really roughly edges, you know, just this rough outline with your black Sharpie. Pull up some images on Pinterest. You can get a lot of awesome royalty-free images from websites these days. So there's an example of just this iris. I kind of want the stem to be coming down like this. And you can use a black Sharpie pen. It doesn't have to be a paint pen. I'm just gonna do one kind of with these ruffled edges, a smaller one over here, and with a little bit of variety, kind of coming off like that. And like that. There's so many irises out right now in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. So it was just calling my name again to do these irises. And I'm just going to draw the stem kind of in behind here. And if you think about how fast this is, like think about if you're just to take this wild background that you cleaned your brushes off or you're practicing on and then draw, say, a heart and go around it with acrylic inks. It's pretty amazing what you can do with not a lot of time, and it gets you out of your head, right? If you use colors and marks that you love, you cannot go wrong. So here's this, I'm gonna let this dry, but what I would do is choose a color that may really make that inner part stand out when I go around it. So in this case, using an opaque, like an acrylic paint, would be great for this because there's so much vibrancy. I don't think I would do like this bright reddish magenta ink around this because I want the inner part, that background, to really stand out. So I'm gonna let this dry. What I would do myself is go back over it with white after. Again, art is all about layering, so going back and making sure that you're getting those layers in. And again, to simplify, you know, doing, say, what was I gonna do here? You know, you could do just like a very basic leaf shape. And, you know, I've cleaned, okay, yeah, I was about to do another one, but I've cleaned my brush. So I'm gonna leave it at that. But just to know there's so much you can do on pages that you feel, you know, this is just sort of a rough page, I'm just gonna throw it out or like set it aside in a drawer. I want you to go back and see how you can resolve your work, how you can try different techniques. And this technique is just really, really fun. And as far as investment, I would just purchase one color, one of your favorite colors, not black, not white, your favorite colors of either the India ink or the Liquitex acrylic ink. I really love the magentas myself. There's also some vibrant blues and greens and oranges. Just purchase one and see if you like working with it. Just remember it's permanent. So again, it dries quite quickly and it won't reactivate with water, or it shouldn't reactivate with water. And is there anything else? Oh, the only other thing that I wanted to do, I wanted to resolve this painting that I was working on last night, and this probably won't come off. Ooh, it is coming off. Good thing my husband put down that layer of protection on this table because I'm already getting it quite messy, which I said I wouldn't, so I just don't want to get this painting magenta on it. Okay, so this is a painting I've been working on, and there's this area where I did gouache and I really didn't like the gouache, so this color. So I'm gonna go back over it with another mixture of gouache. I might just try this pale mint, and if I don't like it, I'll add a little bit of this olive. So this is gouache, which is sort of like watercolor and acrylic combined. This is pale mint acrylic gouache. I'm not going to get into all the details of that. I'm really just learning how to use gouache. And I'm going to just use my round brush. And I like to, I'm funny, I'll like just put the paint right on my paintbrush, or I'll glob it on my painting. And I just wanted to kind of cover up, again, resolving, almost like using white paint, like whiteout, just resolving that area, letting it dry and going back to it once it's dry and just deciding, do I want to add anything on top for texture? Kind of covering up that leaf shape in the background. Let's just see, I can kind of go over like that, almost as though it's this purposeful cloud when really it was just covering something up that I didn't love. I might add a little bit more of that color right here, just in the composition, as though it's like a little cloud. And I feel like, so I used a bit too much water in here because there's bubbles, but that's okay. I'm just kind of going over it. I might have to go over it a few times. And I might do just a tiny little one. Do I want to do another one? I do, maybe just in the corner up here. And then again, kind of cleaning my brush because I don't want to waste this gouache. And that's pretty good. So I think I'm going to leave it at that. I'm going to just grab and again add this color to another painting that I was working on. Playing around with geometrics. So I like how, and again, this is a discovery I just made from cleaning my brush, is I love the geometric pattern coming through this pale mint gouache. I really hope I inspired you somehow today. Thank you for coming on this journey with me. I know it's tricky because a lot of my paintings that I'm showing on video are already almost complete. Although I do think, you know, if you can pick up just one or two different ideas or inspire you to start painting, or even just painting while you have me on in the background. That's what I did with a lot of art classes I took, where I wasn't ready to paint exactly what they were painting, but I would leave it on just to kind of get little tips and tricks. And yeah. Okay, so thank you so much. So this painting I can zoom, where are we? I'm gonna zoom in or out. Woo, there we go. Sorry to make you dizzy. So there's that gouache, which is gonna dry, and you can see the metallics I have down here, my little roses. This was a happy accident, and I added the moon just to make it look purposeful. And so this painting is almost complete. I just wanted to show you. This painting is on 140-pound cold press Arches watercolor paper on a block. So I invested in this because I really like cold press, 140 pounds. This is 12 by 16 inches, so it's quite large. And anyway, I encourage you to invest in high quality paper over high quality art supplies. Thanks so much for watching, and happy creating.